So Carrie mentioned that you know, we were talking, and then when she asked me to speak at this forum, I was thinking, previously I actually gave a talk about how to make a pencil, and then I thought, what should I talk about? Then, you know, I thought chicken rice was a good thing because something that we eat. Some people eat it every day. My son used to eat it every single day until the chicken rice stall near our home started giving him a special price because he was such a regular customer. And I thought maybe this could be a start of a how to make something series. Okay, so what are the ingredients? How do you make it? As usual, I use Google to Google a recipe. So first thing is you boil the chicken so that you can get the stock. And actually, when you boil it, you know, there are a lot of things that go into it as well. There's salt, there's scallions, ginger, pandan leaves, sesame oil. And then, of course, chicken rice is not complete without the chili sauce, the very important chili sauce that has garlic, ginger, red chili. If you want extra zing, you can put chili padi, and fish sauce also if you want that extra umami taste, lime, sugar, and also the chicken broth as well. And then another dipping sauce is the scallion sauce. Some don't have scallion, some just have ginger, but this recipe has scallion and ginger. And then the sweet soy sauce. I personally don't like the sweet soy sauce, but some people do. So it's a mixture of different types of soy sauce, light soy sauce, dark soy sauce, then even palm sugar or brown sugar. And of course, we mustn't forget that we need rice as well. And normally the rice that's used is jasmine rice and it's cooked in chicken fat. So you need the broth again as the key ingredient, and also shallots and ginger and salt. And then from that broth, you can make soup. So you can add cabbage and carrot. And then to make everything look really nice, you can garnish with coriander and make a bed of cucumber to put your sliced chicken on. So if you thought today's talk was about how to cook chicken rice, then that's the end of the talk. You can leave now if that's what you wanted, what you came here for. So now we'll go into what I'm really going to talk about. So let's deconstruct the dish and look at the ingredients. So first, of course, chicken, of course. Without chicken, there's no chicken rice. And rice. So rice, actually, we have to use up large areas of land and a lot of water to grow rice. And then there are all the other ingredients for the sauce, the chili, the ginger, pandan, lime, garlic, scallion. All these we can see, usually we can buy from the supermarket, and we more or less see them in their natural forms, not really processed very much. Then, of course, for the soup, we have carrot and we have cabbage. And then for the bit of cucumber and the garnish, the coriander. Also, all these ingredients we can see in the supermarket, largely unprocessed. And then we have the other ingredients like vegetable oil, sesame oil. So these ones actually require basically to extract the oil from the seeds of these plants. Then we have a whole range of condiments that we need. So soy sauce, light sauce, dark sauce actually requires not only soybeans but wheat as well. And then sugar and salt and water. And then a lot of soy sauce also contains sodium benzoate, which is a food preservative, because our consumers are very far from the source of manufacture. So we usually need preservatives to ensure that the food doesn't spoil. And actually sodium benzoate is made from benzoic acid, which is made from toluene, which is a petroleum product. It's from crude oil that we get, toluene. And then palm sugar is actually made from the nectar in coconut flowers. So very painstakingly collected by the farmers, just little drips of nectar from the flowers. And then once you understand how this is made, then you really appreciate the amount of effort that actually goes into making palm sugar. Then of course sugar cane, right, processed into sugar. We have salt farms from sea salt, anchovies for our fish sauce, water, very important ingredient, which we can get from rain in our country, where we have very many wet days. So you can see there's a lot of processing that actually goes into making all of these condiments from all of these natural resources. Then because actually the complexity is way more than this. It's not just what I've just shown you, but I'm going to focus on chicken to deconstruct further so that you can see the degree of effort it actually goes into getting chicken to our plate. So chickens right now typically farmed indoors in climate controlled sheds or barns, and for it to be commercially viable, we normally have like 14 to 18 chickens per square meter. So if you think about it, that's pretty crowded, but this is actually a higher welfare system already. There are chickens that are grown in even denser conditions than this, but 14 to 18 is considered to be higher welfare. So how do we do this industrial farming? Well, first of all, we need oil and gas. So this is where our fossil fuels all come in. So from oil, we get diesel. And then from diesel, that enables all the mining that we need to carry out. So we need copper, iron ore, limestone, clay, gypsum, zinc, and bauxite. Actually, this is not all. I'm giving you the main ones. And why we need diesel is because the vehicles that we need to do all this excavation run on diesel. And there's currently no real other alternative than using diesel. There's some experimentation using electric trucks and things like that, but it's not economical because the trucks need to be recharged too often, whereas a diesel run truck can go for 14 hours without refueling. And you can see also the kind of scars that we make on the land when we mine. These are giant, humongous holes. It's just unfathomable what scale it's at. I mean, these are little vehicles in there you can see. And I think in here, there's some dots in here, which are also the vehicles that are being used. So these are huge, huge, huge scars on the planet to enable us to have our industrialized way of living. So from these raw materials, we can make steel, which is a very important construction product. And in fact, the process of making steel actually emits carbon dioxide. Then we can also make concrete out of these. And again, the process actually involves a lot of water and emits carbon dioxide. And then we need zinc aluminum for our roofing. So the bauxite actually goes through further processing. Everything in red requires energy, right? So these symbols actually mean that we need energy for all these processes. Then our buildings are not just empty shells. We also need wiring. We need a lot of building services to make them run. So we need copper. And we also have sanitary plumbing and drainage where we need clay as well. So you can see all these resources needed for the building. And then last but not least, we need a lot of plastics. So that comes from oil. We need plastics for insulation, to make conduits, to make some water pipes. For our sanitary and plumbing pipes, some of it is made from plastics as well. And I didn't put here for roofing, actually we have insulation. And then there are actually a lot of plastic components in other parts of the building as well. So construction itself actually involves a lot of energy. In Singapore, especially, we import everything. So there's shipping, there's things that we fly in, we have trucks. Then we need to run our cranes, our cement trucks, our excavators, bulldozers, and all our power tools. So all of these require also energy. And then the chickens actually are fed corn and soy in industrialized farming. And because these are grown in high density, high yield plantations, so they need fertilizers. So the nitrogen-based fertilizers are actually made from natural gas. And then a lot of water, of course, and a lot of farming equipment and machinery also need fossil fuels, diesel especially, to run. And then because you're growing all these in high density, so then you have a pest problem. So now we need pesticides. And our pesticides are actually made from phosphorus. So later on, I will talk about the pollution and how it comes from agriculture. So just bear in mind these nitrogen-based fertilizers and pesticides, which are phosphorus-based. And then later on, you'll understand the impact on the environment of these. So from there, we make our feed for the chickens. And because they are grown in such, again, high density, 14 to 18 chickens per meter square. So now we need to worry about disease. So quite often farmers will add antibiotics into the feed. And of course, all the processing, shipping, flying, trucking, and refrigeration goes into the entire process of industrial farming. And then for the base, they use wood shavings, peanut shells, or rice hulls, which again come from farms. But usually these are byproducts or discards, of farms used for other purposes. And then that's not the end of the story. After you've built the building, you still need to run it. So I didn't have enough space to put any more diagrams and stuff, but we need mechanical systems to feed and water the chickens. So the mechanical systems are made from metals as well, from all these materials and other metals and minerals as well. Then we need ventilation systems because you get a buildup of ammonia here because of the chicken manure. So you need to have fans to extract more air. You need artificial lighting, and then you need waste management and pollution control because the runoff from the factory is toxic. So basically, actually, we treat chickens as products. We don't treat them as animals or living creatures. We just treat them as products, and then we look at productivity. But the irony actually is, although we look at productivity, but this is some information that, if we're really thinking about sustainability, then if you look at the corn and soybean meal, for every gram of protein consumed, chickens yield only 0.33 grams of edible protein. So we go to a lot of effort to grow the corn and soybean, which we can actually eat ourselves, but then we feed it to the chickens to get 1/3 of the protein from the chickens. So a lot of resources going into something. If we look at it right now, it would seem rather wasteful. In fact, future generations might look at our generation and think, how on earth did they actually do it like that? So we didn't arrive at where we are today just all of a sudden. So if you look at like Singapore today, our chickens not only cross roads, our chickens cross the Pacific Ocean, because as you saw in the Slido quiz earlier on, actually Brazil is the country where we import most of our chicken, right? A lot of people thought it was Malaysia, but actually it's the bulk of our chicken comes from Brazil. And if you go to the supermarket, actually a lot of the Brazilian chicken are the frozen ones. The fresh chicken mostly are Malaysian, but the frozen chicken you'll see. So again, there's so much energy in freezing the chickens so that we can actually consume it when we want. So if you look at it globally, the biggest producer of chicken is China by far, and then you have Indonesia, Pakistan, Brazil, United States, and then it dwindles down. But you can see in the entire world, there are only very few producers. And in fact, this is the case for a lot of things, not just chicken. So things like wheat as well, right? As we discovered because of the Ukraine war, actually the reason that Malaysia was not, decided not to sell chickens to Singapore was because of the Ukraine war, because the feed came from Ukraine. The chicken feed for the factory farming in Malaysia came from Ukraine. So Ukraine is one of the biggest producers of wheat. I think it's a major producer of wheat in the world. So the entire world, actually, we have this really intertwined supply chain across 6 continents. So how did that happen? So first thing we need to understand is energy. You can go to this website. This is a very useful website called Our World in Data. And you can actually go and see, this one, of course, I just took a screen capture, so it's static. But if you actually go to the website, you can drag this slider along, and then you can see how things actually evolved. So if you look at the last 200 years, we used to actually rely mainly on biomass, like burning wood. Then after that, coal came into the picture. then oil and gas came into the picture. And around here is when 1965, right, when Singapore was independent. And from here to here, look at the amount of energy that the world is consuming now. So when we look at the Singapore story, how we went from third world to first in one generation, and where we are, during SG50, we celebrated our success. And a lot of our success was due to this availability of energy. Without this, we could not have done that. And if you look at the energy mix today, it's still very, very much reliant on fossil fuels. And that is why our global supply chain is possible, because we have vehicles like these. So if you look at this shipping, this ship, it can actually carry 11,000 containers with a crew of only 13 people. So to us, it's like, wow, very productive, high productivity. But where does the productivity come from? It actually comes from the fossil fuels. And in fact, I'm not talking about this at this for this talk, but in my other talk on how to make a pencil, I talked about how they are like energy slaves, right? It's like having thousands or even millions of slaves doing our work for us. And this is a cargo plane, also requiring jet fuel, which is also fossil fuel. Then when it gets to our ports, we need our container trucks to actually bring them to our distribution centers, and then smaller trucks and smaller vans and other vehicles to deliver them to our retail. Then of course, from the retail part, we also drive. Some people will drive to the supermarket, whatever, buy and then drive home. So you can see that the entire process actually takes a mind-boggling amount of energy. And another bit of information to understand is that right now, fossil fuels actually supply more than 80% of the world's energy consumption, and only 22% is in the form of electricity. So when we talk about electrifying, there are a lot of things that can't really be electrified. Like this ship in particular, for example, there are, people are trying to make electrically powered ships, but the amount of cargo it can carry is a tiny fraction of what a diesel powered ship can carry. So what we are reliant on is in a form that right now cannot be replaced with electricity, right? So our life is about to change dramatically, actually in the near future. So oil is used directly or indirectly to make over 500,000 products. Just now in the Slido quiz, I was pleasantly surprised to see that most of you actually knew this or got this right. So again, I cannot fit so many things on this slide, so I just give you some examples of what oil is used for. So the top part is, on the left-hand side rather, is actually coal mining and natural gas. When you talk about oil, oil is actually the master resource. Oil is what enables coal mining, and oil is what enables its own mining plus natural gas mining. Often oil and natural gas wells are the same because natural gas is actually, it's a fossil fuel. It's very similar to oil. It's just that it's in a gaseous state. So all these vehicles need oil. Then from the oil that we get, we used to need only 1 barrel of oil to extract 100 barrels of oil. Nowadays, it's down to like 12 or 15, something like that. So the amount of oil we can actually extract is becoming less and less. And then if you look at the different forms of fuel that we get from oil, apart from our normal diesel and petrol, we also need it for jet fuel, we need it for flying, then we need it for gas, kerosene, paraffin, butane, etc. And then to make other products like, okay, for our roads, we need it for bitumen. For construction, we need it for waterproofing. And then there's petroleum jelly as well. Some of you have some skin issues, you might want to use petroleum jelly. Then epoxy resin we use for our adhesives, also for some of our industrial coatings. And then we also use oil to make our petrochemicals. From our petrochemicals, we make plastics. So a lot of our pipes, I mentioned just now, water pipes and things, our plastic containers, furniture, our clothes, we got polyester, nylon, etc. The computer I'm using now, the mouse that I'm touching right now, the keyboard, syringes, aspirin, goggles, helmet, furniture, plastic packaging for our food, toiletries, and cosmetics, glue, super glue, fertilizers, and your Bygone and Mortein spray that you use to kill bugs. And then last but not least, we also use oil actually to enable us to mine the minerals to for us to be able to make solar panels and wind turbines. And also in the process of processing all the minerals to turn them into metals that can be used for the actual manufacture of these so-called renewables, we also need fossil fuels. So you can see that actually we are using fossil fuels for every aspect of our lives. And I also wanted to say something about plastics. Like right now, we have somehow demonized plastics, and we think that if we don't use plastic bags when we go shopping, then we are being sustainable. Well, it's good not to use plastic bags, but it's far from being sustainable to just stop use plastic bags. The reason we need plastics is because it's very light, it's very durable, and we use it actually to package a lot of our food. Without plastic packaging, a lot of our food will arrive in a state that can't be consumed. And why we need so much packaging is again because of this 6-continent global supply chain. If your food is grown just in your garden, then there's no packaging at all, you just pick it. But because of our very, very complex food supply chain, we do need plastics. And if we were to outlaw plastics, we will all die actually within a few days because we will just run out of food. So it should be no surprise to you now to know that it takes 10 to 15 times kilocalories of fossils to produce 1 kilocalorie of food. Okay, I will get to the good news soon, I promise. But unfortunately, still need to give you a bit more bad news first before I move to the good news. So we are actually very accustomed to hearing about climate change and carbon, and carbon's become demonized as well. But actually, we really need to be looking at 9 planetary boundaries. Okay, why 9 planetary boundaries? This was a concept that was put forward by a group of scientists from Sweden in 2009, because there's so much information on pollution and about animals dying and even illnesses that we're getting. So much information that it's very difficult for us to process and actually think about what we can do. So the scientists came up with these 9 planetary boundaries because they are actually very similar to how, when we go to a doctor, the doctor will take our pulse, check our temperature, our blood pressure, because these are the vital signs of what makes us healthy or what makes us alive. So the scientists actually condensed all that information into 9 planetary boundaries because these are the 9 key things that gives us an indication on the health of the planet in terms of its life-giving qualities. So climate change is here, only one of the 9. And as you all saw just now in the Slido quiz as well, it's not only caused by carbon dioxide, it's actually caused by methane as well as nitrous oxide. So before I go into that, also one bit of information to give you is that as of April 2022, 5 of these boundaries have already been exceeded. So 5 out of 9 have been exceeded. And there is a 6th that is being proposed in this paper by these researchers. They are looking at fresh water, not only in terms of blue water. Blue water is the natural water cycles from evaporation, then the clouds form and then it rains, more or less an inanimate process. But green water is something which these researchers are proposing as in terms of how plants actually contribute to the water cycle. So in their research, they say that the green water boundary actually has been exceeded. So because we do not have enough plants now to actually contribute to this process of natural water recycling. So if you look at all these planetary boundaries, apart from climate change and green water, there's also biodiversity loss here. Land systems change because we are actually clearing land for a lot of industrial purposes, and that's actually linked to the biodiversity loss as well. Novel entities are to do with the chemical cocktails that we are exposed to and pump into the environment every day. And then nitrogen and phosphorus, I mentioned just now, comes from our fertilizers and pesticides. So you can see that, 5 or 6 boundaries have already been exceeded. So the time to act is now, but we cannot think that, oh, this is something in the future, because it's right now. So a little bit more about nitrous oxide. So this is also a very good website to go to, where it talks about the nitrous oxide budget. And we look at this area, so you can see agriculture is a major contributor to nitrous oxide emissions, because when we use nitrogen-based fertilizers, it actually causes the soil to emit nitrous oxide. And nitrous oxide has a global warming potential 300 times greater than carbon dioxide. So every day we keep talking about carbon dioxide, but we are emitting nitrous oxide that is 300 times worse. And for methane, also from this same website, they also have a methane budget. So if you look at, again, agriculture and also waste, what happens is that when you bury organic matter and it's subjected to anaerobic decomposition, then it produces methane. So methane has a global warming potential 80 times that of carbon dioxide. And actually, that's not the end of the story, because after a decade, it actually reacts with ozone in the atmosphere and becomes carbon dioxide. So after 10 years of warming the planet, it becomes carbon dioxide and continues to warm the planet as carbon dioxide. All right, so just keep this in mind first, anaerobic decomposition, because I will show you later how you can actually reduce this anaerobic decomposition. So our current predicament is not only that we've exceeded planetary boundaries, we are also facing energy and resource decline. What do I mean? Well, this is a graph which shows Hubbard's prediction. This is someone who in the 1950s predicted that we're going to peak oil production, then we're going to decline. But people didn't believe him, because in the 1970s, after the oil crisis, the US discovered shale oil, and then they discovered fracking, and then everybody went, hooray, we've got plenty of oil, don't worry. But most experts actually believe that peak oil occurred in 2018. So we can argue about this date, but the fact is that whether it occurred in 2018 or not doesn't really matter. The reality is oil is a finite resource, and you can see how reliant we are on oil. That's why it really matters for us to know that we are actually, we are going to have much less oil in the few decades to come, right? So if you look at, again, look at SG, SG0 was here, SG50 was here, so hooray, we're celebrating here. And in SG100, we're going to be here, which is this downhill slide of oil, right? So the way we live has got to be very different from what we're accustomed to. Right, doesn't mean that we're all going to die and all that. The good news is coming soon, I promise. Okay, so anyway, this is also another useful website, Worldometer. I think some of you probably looked this up during the COVID time, right? So Worldometer is a useful website, as in it tracks a lot of things. And I went to it. They have this live, this number. If you go to this website, this number is reducing at every second. It's like a counter. So I went 2 days ago at 4:27 p.m. and it says this is how much oil there is left in the world. And based on current consumption, if I did a quick calculation, it means we're 39.75 years left. But actually we have less than that because we are actually pushing up our consumption today, now, even though I think because we don't really understand the situation. So ironically, we're actually pushing our consumption more and more. So it's important for us to understand that, how we approach sustainability actually needs to change. We need to have a very different plan. Then here's some more information on minerals. So this is the World Copper demand versus supply, right? So this is the demand. This is what we want, okay? So right now with all our ESG and sustainability initiatives, whatever, we want lots of solar panels, electric vehicles, electrify everything. So we need copper. Copper doesn't really have a substitute right now. We need copper for all the wiring and anything to do with electricity, we will need copper. The demand is here, and we are planning to provide copper here, but the real supply is here. And this is the biggest copper mine in Chile. So another big scar on the planet. And then this is the price of copper. So actually, the price of things made from copper and other minerals, right? They're actually going to keep going up because the supply is going to keep going down. So we actually need copper to make all of these things that we think we need for not only the so-called energy transition, but our daily lives as well. And actually, the current push to achieve net zero carbon emissions is creating a demand for minerals that our mines will not be able to meet. And more importantly, what we really need to understand is actually accelerating our depletion of oil, because we need oil for all these processes. And I'm only showing you copper, but the same story for nickel, lithium, cobalt, graphite. Actually, lithium and graphite are even worse. The supply is even dwindling even more than this. So actually mining, apart from all this, not having enough, mining actually exacerbates biodiversity loss. Okay, I'm going to go to the good news now. Actually, this was the question that my aunt asked me when I told her I was talking about this. She says, does that mean I have to stop eating chicken rice? Well, it could be yes, it could be no, right? Depending on what we do now. The key actually is to simplify. If you look at the global supply chain and the complexity involved and how, our supply chains have been just pushed so far apart, and there's so much energy needed to produce things, to process them, to transport them. What we really need to do is simplify and bring the supply chains a lot closer. So I want to introduce to you this idea of permaculture. Of course, I cannot do it in these few minutes that I have here, but you can also Google it and find out more about it yourself. But permaculture is basically a design approach. It's not a prescribed solution, but it's a design approach towards looking at how we can create agriculturally productive ecosystems by working with nature and by understanding nature and by being part of the entire natural process. So if you look at how we grow chicken, for example, how should the chicken interact with all the other parts of the farm, right? So you can see that you give food scraps to the chicken gives the home feathers, food, fuel. If the chicken eats the bugs in the garden, then the chicken gets food from the garden. So there is this in every natural process. There is a natural cycle of give and take, right? So we have to change our mindset of seeing nature as some resource that we can just exploit into this give and take relationship with nature. If we understand that, then we will be able to have chicken rice for many generations to come. So how does permaculture deal with farming chickens? Well, first of all, in permaculture, if you look at nature, animals and plants don't live apart. Whereas in our industrialized farming, we put animals in different farms, and we don't even mix species. We hardly mix species. Like you either grow cows or you grow chickens or you grow sheep, but you don't put them all together, right? And you don't put them all together with your plants either. But in a permaculture farm, you actually mimic, I wouldn't say mimic, you are using natural processes. So you put the plants and animals together. And when you do that, the chicken poop becomes the fertilizer for the plants. The chicken eats the bugs, so you've got no pesticides. You also don't need electricity because you don't need to deliver food to the chickens. They just go and help themselves. You don't need ventilation systems because they're out in the open. And you also don't need irrigation, because in permaculture, you also learn to design your farm such that it captures water, and you also help your soil to become absorbent. And of course, you do need some resources to build a chicken coop, but not as much as a chicken, like an industrialized farm, right? So you just need some timber to do the framing and maybe some weatherboarding. And you do need roofing and some chicken wire also to keep the chickens inside, if when they want to be inside, right? When they're not outside scratching and foraging around. And inside the chicken coop itself, you can actually use a deep litter method where you build up. You don't actually need to change the litter very often. You can put down straw and leaves as bedding and let it build up in layers. And the chickens will actually scratch and forage their own litter. And it actually starts decomposing and forming compost as well. So you can actually use this as compost for your plants. And because the chickens are foraging around in their own litter, they actually build up immunity, so you don't give them antibiotics. But important thing to understand is you can only have 1 chicken per meter squared, not 14 to 18. If you're doing 14 to 18, it's unnatural. Nature cannot deal with 14 to 18. That's why we create a problem when we do that. But if we understand this and farm 1 chicken per square meter, then the chickens can stay healthy. We can use natural cycles, and then we can still have healthy chickens. And there's also no smell, because again, the microbes help to break things down, and you don't have this anaerobic decomposition that I mentioned just now, right? Because everything is exposed to air. So what about Singapore? I know people say we don't have enough land, we're land scarce. Is it possible for us to have small or numerous farms? Well, actually, we already do have, right? So I'm just showing you one example today, but I've been visiting many over the past few months, and really, really happy to see things sprouting up everywhere, literally. But this one is at Winstead Road. It's called Mad Garden at Winstead. So Mad stands for make a difference. And this is actually just a piece of land which is between buildings. And this was what it looked like in 2019. You know, the usual sort of manicured lawn, then some palm trees here. And this is actually what we're accustomed to seeing everywhere in Singapore. This is what it looked like. It looked like in 2022. I don't have a recent picture of this view. But I actually call this after in inverted commas, because it's not really after, because it's a living thing. So it continues to change. Yes, it's not static, it's not a before after, it's a before and then somehow in progress sort of thing. And we actually have, I go to this farm every weekend, and we have urban harvest experience once a month. Tomorrow we're having one actually. This was what we had in February, where families came with children, and then we cooked food from produce from the farm to share with the families. And it was really, really nice to see little kids as well. Little kids love it. They love all the bugs and the creepy crawlies. And we should encourage them to love the bugs and the creepy crawlies. And we also made bowls out of banana leaves. Then after we finished eating, we just put the banana leaves in the compost and gave it back to nature, so that nature will next round give us some more nice things to eat. And these are actually our co-workers. So the human workers are there on weekend mornings. And then our other co-workers, these are our 24/7 co-workers, with butterflies, lizards, birds, actually got millipedes, earthworms, but I don't have pictures of them. There's a little frog here and a ladybug. So these are our co-workers who actually help to look after the place, and that's why we don't need to use any pesticides. We also don't use fertilizers, because we compost everything and return the nutrients back to the ground. So coming back to planetary boundaries, how does permaculture actually help? Actually, when you know how to rehabilitate your soil, it will actually absorb carbon. So that helps with the carbon situation. Then when you compost, you are actually using aerobic decomposition. So you can actually reduce methane emissions by composting. And for the green water issue, actually, when you have healthy soil and healthy plants, they actually help to absorb the moisture and be part of the green water cycle. We don't use fertilizers or pesticides, so that takes care of the nitrogen and phosphorus overshoot. And we don't use other chemicals either. And actually, if we have numerous farms in urban areas, we can actually take the pressure off rural land. Because if we can grow a significant amount of food within the city, then we don't have to import so much from the rural farms, which means that we can actually return land back to nature to preserve biodiversity. So we can rehabilitate land that was previously cleared for farming to feed people in cities. And we can actually also increase biodiversity in urban areas. In the permaculture farms, you will find that a lot of our animal friends will come back and repopulate the area. Actually, we saw that during COVID, right? When the humans were in lockdown, all the animals came out, right? I mean, I love those videos of the kangaroos hopping across the cities and the goats and everything running, through the streets and all that. I thought that was hilarious. And you can see how damaging we are actually, that when you lock us up, everybody else rejoices. And last but not least, actually, permaculture strengthens social foundations. Why is that? Because actually the farms are community focal points. I've made a lot of new friends over the past year, just from people coming by and joining the community of volunteers that comes to the farm, and we share food and stories, and it doesn't feel like work at all. We have a lot of fun. And it also, of course, significantly reduces demand for all the energy and resources in the processing and transportation, packaging. Once a week, although we are not producing a lot right now, but once a week, I actually harvest some vegetables and I bring back to my home, which is within walking distance, and I make a meal for my family. There's no packaging involved, there's no transportation, it's just myself walking. And usually I try and harvest it just before I want to eat, so I don't even need to refrigerate. And actually, when we have polycentric networks, if we have lots of farms everywhere, it builds up a lot of resilience within the community. Because if, let's say, I have some bug infestation and my crops or my plants didn't turn out well, then there will be a neighboring farm that can help me. So when we have polycentric networks of farms everywhere, we can actually help each other and share our produce. So just before I go to the last item, I will just tell you a bit about the Circle for Human Sustainability. So this is the society that I come from, and we actually a multidisciplinary society. We want to bring together scientists, sociologists, economists, and build environment professionals to look at sustainability holistically. And importantly is that we also want to look at how the system needs to change so that we don't need to rely on GDP growth to ensure that everyone has a livelihood. And also we want to enable ecologically responsible behavior. So ecologically responsible meaning that we know where we fit into the ecology, and then we play our part as participants in the ecology. So this is our vision. You can actually go to our website. Actually, in the previous slide, I'll just show that again. You can go to our website here, tchs-global.org, to find out more about us, and also can email us here, contact@tchs-global.org. So this is our vision. And Carrie also actually mentioned the donut economics in her parliamentary speech. So this is actually part of our part of the concept that we use. We find that Kate Raworth's donut economics is a very useful concept for us, because at least we keep in mind, these are the limits, but we also keep in mind that we must make sure everyone has a social foundation. Everyone has access to a livelihood, has access to food. Nobody should starve, right? So we use this actually as a very important model, but it's a conceptual model. Kate Raworth doesn't dictate any solutions. So what we are doing is looking at solutions, but keeping in mind this conceptual model. How does that happen? I mean, we are also actually looking at the economic system and how it needs to change. So the conventional economic system actually causes us to exceed the planetary boundaries because it actually encourages more consumption. It's motivated by self-interest, basically involves working for money. And then we like to buy lots of luxuries and treats with our money. But actually, we do have a social economy. It's just that it kind of operates on the fringe. So what we're trying to do is actually link the two together, and also look at what occupations are actually priceless. During COVID, I think we should have learned a good lesson that people who do cleaning and all the so-called menial work are actually, they shouldn't be considered low-wage workers. They actually should be considered very valuable to us. They're actually priceless. So instead of them being just a separate profession, actually it's a bit like doing household chores. All of us should be involved in carrying out these priceless occupations. So there's a way in which we can balance the economy such that perhaps 4 days a week we work in our paid professions, and maybe 1 day a week we are rostered to do some of the housekeeping for the whole of society, right? I mean, that's a possibility. From the consumer economy, actually, government can actually generate some revenue. I'm suggesting actually, like, we have a goods and services tax, but maybe we should be taxing goods and not services, so that we actually reduce the consumption of goods, but we encourage people to provide services like repairing things or repurposing things, right? So this is something that could be considered. Another thing is we could actually have a COE on limited resources, not just on cars. We could have a COE on air conditioning, for example, something like that. And from that revenue, some of that money can be channeled towards supporting the social economy, and also ensuring that basic necessities are there for people who need. And a person actually in a balanced economy, we can actually shift, like if some people want to work more in the money economy, that's fine. And some people work less, depending on your personal circumstance. Maybe some people want to work more in the social economy and just do a little bit of part-time work in conventional economy. So you can actually shift the balance. So I see it as a very Taoist kind of approach to life, where you have a yin-yang balance and you can balance the yin-yang yourself. And last but not least, actually, we can also channel resources towards rehabilitating damaged environments. And in Singapore, actually, there's a lot we can do to rehabilitate our city and make our city into a living environment, not just for humans, but for other creatures as well. Okay, so nearing the end now, what can you do? These are such huge problems. And it seems like, are we all helpless? Do we always have to ask government to do something? Or can we do something ourselves? So this is my compost bin. And this was in 1st January. Then after a month, it decomposed to this state. And then after 2 months, it decomposed to this state. So this state now, it looks like soil. I've actually emptied this bucket already. I put it into my potted plants. And this is my, in this basket, this is my so-called live composting. That means every day I put all my veggie scraps and stuff there. And then when it's sort of full up, I will transfer to this bucket. And in this bucket, I leave it alone to let it decompose. So you can see that the volume actually reduces. And I have a system where this one is empty and this one is the one that I will flip every 3 to 4 days, like twice a week. I put this empty one on top of this one, then I flip the whole thing over. So it takes me about 30 seconds to flip my compost to make sure it's aerobic. And what do I put in there? Fruit peel, uncooked vegetable scraps, garden cuttings. These are nitrogen rich. I also put these. So just now in the Slido, most of you thought you can only put fruit peel and vegetable scraps, right? But you can put dead leaves, cardboard, newspaper, tissue paper, tea bags, eggshells, fingernails and hair as well. I put, and my vacuum cleaner dust as well. So every time I tell people I put my fingernails and hair into the compost, people are surprised. But if we understand that we are animals, we are actually biodegradable. So all the bits that come off us actually is biodegradable as well, right? And the most important thing is you must give things time, right? And then at the end of the process, you get this black gold. So and this tiny little dot here is actually a black soldier fly. And what I learned from this process is actually we can be one of nature's workers. We tend to think that these nature's workers are working for us. Actually, we are working for them as well. So, instead of seeing ourselves as, some kind of custodian, we are actually not. We are actually participants, right? We are one of nature's workers. So natural cycles take time. Industrial revolution has made us impatient because we can just press a button and things happen instantly. And actually GDP growth has made us prioritize productivity and profits over real value. What do I mean by real value? Actually soil, the black gold is real value because it gives life. So we can actually take a different approach to urban planning and look at land differently. Land is not just a lifeless abstract plane on which to build buildings. Healthy soil is valuable, and we can actually design our cities as an ecosystem. So we actually must do our part. If we do our part in returning nutrients to nature, then she rewards us with abundance. This is a papaya harvested from Winstead. It weighed 4.1 kg, but that wasn't the biggest one. The biggest one was 4.9 kg. And every week we're continuing to harvest these 4 kg size papayas. So just to finish off with another quote from Bill Mollison, who is the inventor or founder, inventor of permaculture. He says, the greatest change we need to make is from consumption to production, even if on a small scale in our own gardens. If only 10% of us do this, there is enough for everyone. So if we want to enjoy chicken rice, then we need to give back to nature, and then nature will let us keep having chicken rice for many generations to come. Okay, thank you very much.